Let go of any striving. Sit in the stillness for a moment longer and witness the quality of mind, heart, and body that you've cultivated during this time of meditation. Just breathe into this sacred moment. Know yourself to be an emanation of supreme consciousness, divine. From this consciousness, send loving kindness to all beings everywhere, without exception. See everyone in their full spiritual radiance. See all circumstances unfolding in divine timing, supported by grace. Affirm that this piece of meditation will remain with you throughout the entire day and will bless everyone that you meet. Offer inwardly a word of gratitude for this time, for this path, gratitude for the teachers on this path, and those seers who came before them. Let us go into this day sharing our radiance, anchored in the divine, and so it is. Let's chant Om and seal this time of meditation with sacred sound. May our thoughts be aligned with Dharma. May our speech be aligned with Dharma. May our heart and our actions be aligned with Dharma. Amen. This morning I'm going to share with you from a book called The Supreme Yoga. And it is the Yoga Vasistha. It's a beautiful collection of teachings and stories to convey the teachings. And this portion is on the nature of mind. It's something I've been contemplating for a couple of days. So I thought you might join me in this. Mind is only perception, and perception is movement in consciousness. The expression of this movement is action, and fruition follows this. Mind is an intention arising in the omnipotent and infinite consciousness. It stands between the real and the unreal, but inclined towards comprehension. Though not different from infinite consciousness, it thinks that it is. Though non-doing, it thinks it does. Such is the mind, and these qualities are inseparable from the mind. Even so, the soul, the individual soul, and the mind are inseparable. Whatever the mind thinks of, the organs of action strive to materialize. Once again, mind is action. Mind is only perception, and perception is movement and consciousness. The expression of this movement is action, and fruition follows this. Whatever the mind thinks of, the organs of action strive to materialize. I'm sure we all are familiar with that. Whatever the mind thinks of, the rest of us, body, intention, follows. It tries to bring it to fruition. And karma, or in here it says fruition follows this, but karma follows. So when we engage in actions, reactions follow. Or we set in motion a series of consequences. We had talked about this a little while back, where it's not necessarily a thing to fear. You know, some people think, oh, karma is all bad. But karma is also good. When we set in motion the fruition of action, it is all about intention. Truly. So, this particular set of teachings, in the very beginning it says, if you want to awaken, study this. Francisca's saying, uh-oh, which means we lost audio for a moment. Okay, so I will just say that one more time. In the beginning of this book, it says, in the very beginning it says, if you want to awaken, study this. And I thought, ooh, well, are they saying that this is the book to study? Yes, they are. And as I've been reading these teachings, I find that they are deep, very deep, and need to be read over and over. But it's peeling away the teachings. Each time I read them, I get a little bit more. So just now when I was reading that to you, I've read this, several times over the last few days. But as I was reading this to you, the sentence that stuck out for me was, though non-different from the infinite consciousness, it thinks that it is. Though non-doing, it thinks that it does. Speaking of the mind. Though non-different from infinite consciousness, because the teachings say that everything that is infinite consciousness expressing. Right? So there is one life expressing as all that is. These concepts are to be contemplated. It's not something where you say, oh yeah, I get that. I think because we are in these bodies and we are working with these minds that are always reaching out into the world, and in here it says is always reaching out into the world. And in these teachings it just said that the mind is inclined toward comprehension. So our minds are always dissecting and comparing and trying to understand what it is taking in. So while we are working with that, it's difficult to immediately understand that everything is infinite consciousness expressing. The mind doesn't just get that, but the intuition does. Intuition is defined as knowing without knowing, meaning knowing without the use of ordinary mind. So I'd like you to begin to think about how you have experienced the arising of your own intuition and how you may have acted upon it or not acted upon it. So, let's see, where is that portion? In the yoga teachings it says to, with the mind, transcend the mind. And that just sounds crazy. When you think about it, with the mind, transcend the mind. Use the mind to go beyond the mind. So, what does that say to you? To me, it says to use the faculty of mind intentionally. So we know what the mind is going to do. It's going to investigate. It's going to compare. So what we put before the mind as our ongoing inquiry is what is true, what is lasting, what is true and what is lasting. So maybe throughout your day you say, all right, I know what my mind is doing, and I know that if I just let it do its thing and follow it, we'll just go further and deeper into the world, into judging and comparing, rather than taking in and examining what's going on right before our very eyes. So you can ask in any situation, is what I'm thinking true? How do I know this? It's amazing if you go throughout your day thinking, do I really know the thing that I'm thinking is true right now? You know, I think about all the bits of information that we take in from the internet every day. That's one place everybody goes every day and takes in information. When I think about all the bits of information that we receive and accept as true, how do we know anything? You know, we trust sources, right? We may receive something from a source, like I'll give you two examples. One, we receive something from our spiritual teacher. We're going to assume that's true because that's the relationship we're in, right? We're in a trusting relationship where we trust that the teacher's not going to tell us something that's untrue. That just wouldn't make sense. It would betray the relationship, right? That it wouldn't happen. Okay. And then you have sources that are self-serving and will tell you something that may not necessarily be a lie, but it may be misleading. It may contain bits of information that are placed in there to motivate you, to manipulate you, whatever, right? And that could be coming to you from whatever the source is. But the intention is everything. If information is coming to you from someone or some source that is ultimately self-serving, that means that it is inclined to benefit the other and may not be ultimately useful for you. Right? Okay. So that's just a couple of examples of how we can receive information and it may not necessarily be true. But the most important part of this practice is the inquiry, is being able to examine with the question, how do I know? Or how can I know? Sometimes you can't know, and that's okay. But then that would determine what you do with the information, correct? Should I act on this? I don't know. So now we go to not just information received from outside sources, but from our inner dialogue. we accept so many things from our inner self in that inner dialogue as true or something that we need to act upon. And that's often not the case. This exercise that I invite you to practice is actually fun. I think it's fun. We could go down a road of worry and say, oh my God, nothing I think is true. But I don't think you'll do that. But even more fun is to examine, hey Chuck, is to examine how your intuition arises and how you may or may not follow it. I'm going to use an example of when I notice my intuition is awakened and I'm following it. And Nancy's going to be able to chime in on this at some point, but in my gardening. When gardening, I don't have any real solid information on what I'm doing. Our intuition knows several things. Face it towards the sun, water, all of that. But our intuition also knows about life and how life works because we're a part of it, because we are it, right? So when we're working with things that we're encouraging to grow, it's not just water, it's not just sun. There's something that we know, and this is really hard for me to actually put into words, but I'm going to give it a shot. There's just a relationship of knowing about life and its process. And when we put our hands in the soil and when we touch a seed and drop it in, there's a relationship happening between our knowledge of life that is being expressed through us and our relationship with the soil and the seed and nurturing the plant. Even when we're working with plants in pots in our house, there's just a little thing we're doing when we're spritzing the leaves and nurturing a plant that is unspoken relationship with life. That's an example of how we just intuit and are in relationship with life. It happens in cooking. It happens when you're nurturing another person. You just sometimes just know what to do and what not to do. Sometimes when you're teaching, sometimes when you're heading out and walking in a particular direction, you might feel drawn in that direction. You might feel like, I'm not going that way today. There's something tells me I should go this way. Sometimes we listen. Sometimes we poo-poo it. But there is something going on inside of us all the time that we should listen to. And it's not necessarily happening in mind per se as thoughts, right? So one more thing I want to say that comes out of the yoga teachings. Roy Eugene Davis is very fond of letting us know this, and that is everything that we want to know, ultimately, we can contemplate and know. All the wisdom that we need to have is really within us, and we are discovering it all the time. When our intuition arises, or when we have what is sometimes seen as revelations, it's more like remembering than anything else. I know that you have had an experience of knowledge coming to you that you did not receive in the usual way. Something that you discovered within yourself that did not necessarily come from the outside, or something from the outside triggered a knowing that was within you. And I'm sure that a lot of that, that you can say, yes, I've had that experience, may have come from studying these teachings. There's some deep wisdom within each and every one of us that is waiting to be awakened. And your meditation practice and your spiritual practices gives you many opportunities to witness that. The deeper you go, the deeper you go. The more you will discover. So I would like for you to consider this day how your intuition is guiding you, and to walk with the question, is this true, and how do I know, and how can I know? And just, don't worry about it. Just walk with it and watch your inner process and how the process of coming to know works, and the different ways of knowing. In the opening sutras of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, there was a lesson on the ways of knowing. You might go back to that sometime over the next few days if you feel inclined, and how we obtain knowledge and how we examine what information we receive with what parts of ourselves. So that's where I'm going to stop, and I'm hoping that you have time and inclination to share some of your wisdom with me. Whenever you're ready.